generosity or generous. Yesterday, I have tried to explain three types of volitional actions. Among them, I have mentioned only two volitional actions yesterday. So today I would like to mention the last one. And again I will try to explain the remaining other aspects which are important to understand the generosity or generous act. Before that, I would like to remind you some of the Buddha's words. I am afraid of feeling boredom to you when I try to do so. I would like to know, would you prefer to listen to the Buddha's word at the beginning?
Oh, yes.
Yes? Because the Buddha's words are connected with our topic also, how we have to try to see the unwholesome aspects and wholesome aspects, and how the Buddha looked at them. It is also necessary, therefore I am trying to mention some of the Buddha's words. These are the stanzas from the Dhammapada, but it is not in the way which described in the Dhammapada. It was described in the stanza form, but here we have to listen to it in ordinary form. So therefore at first I would like to remind you some of the verses in Pali which I would like to refer here. In Dhammapada there are twin verses. Among those twin verses I would like to pick up two of the twin verses which is connected with the wholesome and unwholesome acts. Idha sochati pyacha sochati papakari ubhayattha sochati so sochati so vihanyati disva kamma kilittha mattano. Idha modati pyacha modati katapunyo ubhayattha modati so modati so pamodati disva kamma visuddhi mattano. The meaning is, for the door of evil there is only grief, here as well as hereafter. In both states he experiences grief, seeing his own unwholesome acts. For the door of good deeds there is rejoicing, here as well as hereafter. Joy and more joy are his as he sees his own right action. Idha tappati pyacha tappati papakari ubhayattha tappati papang me katanti tappati bhiyo tappati duggating gato. Idhanandati Peccanandati Katapunyo Ubayattanandati Punyang me katanti nandati bhiyo nandati sugatingato. The door of evil reaps suffering here and hereafter, in both states, remembering I have committed evil, not only here but hereafter he experiences more suffering, because he has gone to a state of suffering. The door of good deeds reaps happiness here and hereafter, in both states, remembering I have done good deeds, and there is more joy, because he has gone to a blissful state. So we can see in these stanzas or verses the actual act of wholesome and unwholesome and their results. We are listening to the Dhamma talk about generous act, which is one of the wholesome acts. And that wholesome act the Buddha described all the time at first. If we try to do the research work, how the Buddhas as well as the Bodhisattvas start their activities. There are specially 10 perfections described as the perfectible qualities to become a real bodhisattva. There it is mentioned at first the perfection of generosity. And it is also said that bodhisattvas have to fulfill the generous act at first as the perfection. And when the Buddha described about those wholesome activities to act, at first he had shown generous act. There are 10 types of wholesome acts to cleanse one's mind, to purify one's mind. And those 10 types of acts are the foundation to purify one's mind. So therefore it is called Punya Kriya Vatu. Punya means purity of mind. Kriya means act. Vatu means foundation. The act to purify one's mind depending on those 10 aspects. That is the meaning of that word Punya Kriya Vatu. Among those 10 types of acts, at first it is started dana, the generous act. And then sila, bhavana, apachayana, vayavaca, pati dana, pattanumodana, dhamma savana, dhamma desana, ditthiju kamma. In this way there are 10 types of wholesome activities to purify one's mind. So dana is the first and foremost purifying foundation. So that is why it is very important to understand about the generous act. And to perform the generous act, volition plays great part. According to the volition, the qualities or the benefit of the generous act depends. As much as the volition will become pure, clear, and sublime, so much greater will be the fruit, will be the benefit. So therefore, it is necessary to have clear and pure volition when people perform generous act. We have already listened about two types of volitional act. The first volitional act, which arises before the generous act, which is called Pubbha Cetana, the first volition. And the volition act which arises during the performance of generous act, which is called Muncha Cetana. And after performing the generous act, again one has to purify his volition, not to break his or her wholesome state of mind. So they should have same kind of pure volition after performing the generous act. There should be joy, rapture, happiness, free from all sorts of mental distractions, especially greed, hatred, and delusion. Because there are so many examples given in the text, although some people have the pure volition before and at the present moment, but later on they break their volition. Sometimes it may occur to us also. Sometimes some people offer something to someone, later on they think, why I offered that thing? Now it is needed for me. I have done wrong. And even some people are there who want to get back that thing. And that is the breaking of the later volition which arises after the offering. If you try to study the life story of the Buddha and Bodhisattvas, you will find many examples who break the later volition because of such thoughts. Even some people were there, and they even took out the offered things back again. So therefore the mind is so strange. We cannot have any control on our mind. So uncontrollable mind can do anything. So therefore, understanding has the importance in doing or in performance of the wholesome act. Now I would like to describe you the divisions of generous act. There are generous act which is connected with the worldly things. People perform generous act. They have desire in such performance. Because of this generous act, may I have a son. May I have a daughter. May I have such and such worldly possessions and pleasures and joys and enjoyments. That kind of wish are full of in our mind. Whenever we do something, we expect in return. I don't know what is the motivation of Western people, but in our Eastern countries, really the people have that kind of wishes. If they don't have children, they expect children when they perform the generous act or any other act, wholesome act. Their motivation is to obtain the worldly pleasures and worldly possessions. And even there are people, when there will be some kind of the acts concerning with the court, and to win in the what is called the case. So they do some kind of wholesome act, and their wishes, may I win in that case. So such type of intentions arises in our mind. If we have that kind of intention, it is just connected with the worldly pleasures. So therefore, it is said, Vata Nisita Dana. The generous act which is associated or united with the worldly possessions or worldly pleasures and worldly enjoyments. Some even hope with this generous act, may I have a lovable person in both sides. Yes, they do that kind of wish. So it was quite strange. But just having the intention to get rid of these worldly sufferings, to realize the ultimate goal as the deliverance, if they perform the generous act, and that generous act is called Vivatta Nisita Dana, which is not concerned with the world cycles or world existence, not connected with the worldly pleasures. And that generous act is counted as the pure generous act, and that is the act of bodhisattvas. They never expect anything in return. They just make wish that with this generous act, may all these beings be free from suffering as well as myself. And these are the two types of generous act. One is connected with worldly affairs, and another is free from worldly affairs. Again, there is another two types of generous act. One act is called Puggalika Dana, giving or performing the generous act to give only the benefit to an individual person. And Sangika Dana, the generous act is performed without making any discrimination. They perform the generous act just for the community, welfare of community, for the benefit of community. There is no any discrimination, this person or that person. Just trying to give the benefit of generous act as a whole. And that generous act is praised by the Buddhas and the wise. And again we can classify the generous act in another two ways. Generous act which is connected with outwardly objects, and the generous act which is connected with Dhamma. So there is the generous act as Amisa Dana, and there is the generous act as the Dhamma Dana. When you perform generous act just using the outwardly objects, as we have already mentioned, those 10 types of objects, and some questions arose when I described those 10 types of objects. Some of the devotees wanted to know about their service, and when they offer some money or some coin or gold or silver or something, whether they are counted dana or not. They also dana. But especially the 10 numbers are mentioned, which is important in our life as a lay person as well as a mendicant. Suppose for the monks, money, gold, silver is not suitable. But they also need to have those 10 types of objects which we have already mentioned. For the purpose of gaining those things, so therefore devotees try to offer the money in appropriate way, not directly to the monks, but from a kapiya karaka, not in hand to hand, but in different way. And what purpose? To fulfill the 4 requisites, which arises suitably through the kapiya. So therefore money, silver, gold is not mentioned there, but it doesn't mean that you cannot offer money, gold and silver. You can offer it. to those people who can hold it. And you can offer to make it suitable thing. And again there arose, what about the services? Some people are there who don't give anything as the object, but they have some kind of generous mind and generous act, physical act, verbal act. Are they generous acts? Yes, it is generous act. Whenever someone getting in trouble, you don't have to give anything, but you have your speech to satisfy him, to give him some kind of advice, important ideas to get rid of such problems, such troubles, and that is giving. Because through that nice speech, appropriate speech, inspiring speech, one's suffering may go away, and you are helping some way. That is giving. And when you do some services to help needy people as well as to the eldest people, weak people, that is also generous act. So therefore we shouldn't have any doubt that only those 10 things are the generous act and other things are not. It depends on your attitude or motivation, how you act. Sometimes services could be counted as the wholesome behavior, and it could be included in the moral conduct. Just now I have mentioned 10 types of wholesome acts. There is mentioned the apachayana and vayavacha. Apachayana means paying respect to the respectable people, elder people, and although one may be younger one, but his intellect might be exceeding to the other people, and he could be a respectable one. So there are 2 types of respectable people we can get. One is respectable because of the old age, elderness, but one is respectable because of his wisdom, because of his qualities, because of his virtues. And these qualities is counted as, the apachayana is counted as the moral group. So it is included in sila. In the same way, vayavacha, the Pali word, is rendered to the service, doing various service works, helping works, welfare works. All these are these services are the good behaviors of a person, moral behaviors of a person, nice behaviors of a person, good conduct. So that is why it is counted as the sila. But it is also could be counted as the generous act, if it goes as the help, as giving to others, not just only to develop one's moral conduct, then it is giving. So therefore, amisha dana is connected with the outwardly objects, but the dhamma dana is connected with the mental work, mental possessions. So therefore in the text, dhamma dana is described very, very detailed way. I would like to mention you here what kind of dana could be dhamma dana. Although the speech or the giving discourse is counted as the samadhi group. Giving discourse is work of samadhi, act of samadhi. Why? To give discourse, great amount of concentration is necessary. Without having such concentrated power, it is very difficult and hard to give the discourse. So that is why it is counted as the samadhi. But there is giving in that discourse, various wholesome things can be given through that discourse, and even can remove unwholesome states of others. So it is also giving. So therefore, in the text it is said, what is Dhammadana? Dhammadana means making known to others what is the wholesome act and what is the unwholesome act. Giving that understanding is Dhammadana. And what is full of fault, with defect, and what is faultless. Giving that understanding is Dhammadana. And there are some acts which is to be blamed by the wise people. And there are some acts which is praiseworthy by the wise people. And that kind of showing way is Dhammadana. If through that Dhamma discourse, if one can guide to the people, if you try to cultivate such and such things, then it will be harmful to you. It will bring suffering to you. So don't try to do that. That kind of advice or admonition is Dhammadana. And there are some acts which brings nice fruit, good fruit, wholesome fruit. And then the discourse tells them, do such things. Try to increase such things. Try to cultivate such things. And that is Dhammadana. There isn't anything substantially to give, but there is something which connected with mind. And the giving is concerned with the mental attitudes. Therefore it is called Dhammadana. And the Dhamma discourse gives the proper idea to the people. This type of work is called wholesome work, and this type of work is called unwholesome work. So one has to give up unwholesome work and one has to perform the wholesome work. If people get that message from the discourse, that is also Dhammadana. And through the discourse, one can understand how one can get enjoyment, lawful enjoyment in this world as well as hereafter. If they understand the benefits here and hereafter through the discourse, that is also Dhammadana. And the greatest Dhammadana is to realize the actual truth. If the discourse gives guidance to them, this has to be obtained. This has to be well known. This has to be clearly understood. What is this here? what we need to understand clearly. The truth of suffering has to be understood clearly. So if the discourse can give that way, technique, method, and can show the path to realize and to understand deeply the nature of suffering, so that is the highest Dhammadana, giving understanding about the truth of suffering, which has to be well known, penetrable, that has to be penetrated. And there are another truth which has to be abandoned. The second truth, the cause of suffering, has to be abandoned. If the discourse gives that idea, that show that path to make the people to give up the cause of suffering as the craving. And there are another truth which has to be realized. What are they? Or what is there that? That is the Nibbana, which has to be realized. And if one can give guidance to realize the Nibbana, or the cessation of suffering, is great Dhammadana, greatest Dhammadana. And there are the way which has to be developed. If the discourse give that understanding, how to develop something to get the real understanding to reach to the cessation of suffering. So in this way, giving proper understanding to obtain, to realize all those Four Noble Truths is the greatest Dhammadana, the text said, because it is the way to for the liberation or deliverance, or to get rid of the suffering world. So there are various ways of Dhammadana. If we know how to perform the Dhammadana, then we will giving the greatest gift as the generous act to the people in this world. These are the various dhanas which briefly we should try to understand. The important thing is to understand the objective dana as well as worldly objective dana, as well as the dana which is connected with our heart and with our mind. Dhamma dana is connected with our heart and with our mind. I have already mentioned there are two types of dhanas. Puggalika dana, the dana which is connected with an individual, and Sangika dana, which is connected with the community or with the group. There is a story in the text which occurred at the time of the Buddha. What kind of dana the Buddha gave preference most? Once the Buddha's stepmother, Mahapajapati Gautami had woven 2 pairs of clothes, that means robes, and went to the Buddha, and she requested to the Buddha that, Lord, these robes are woven by myself to give much benefit for me. Please accept yourself these robes. Then the Buddha said to his stepmother, Gautami, give this robe to the Sangha. If you give this robe to the Sangha, then not only you are giving these robes to the Sangha, but to me also. Second time, Mahapajapati Gautami requested to the Buddha to accept the robe himself. But second time also, the Buddha refused to accept as an individual person. Third time she requested. Third time also the Buddha refused to accept it and tried to persuade her to give the pair robes to the Sangha. At that time there was standing Venerable Elder Ananda. Then Venerable Elder Ananda enumerated the qualities of the stepmother of the Buddha and described the excellent way she had taken care of the Buddha in his whole life. Then the Buddha said, it was not for lack of gratitude that I did not accept these robes. It was to help her gain more benefit by offering the robe to the whole Sangha community, because I am included in it. And the Buddha described 14 types of individual persons as the recipients and 7 types of sanghas too. If I mention all those numbers, you might feel very boring. What to do? You may have long list. Should I mention? Yes. Then that's all right. As the individual recipients, there are 14 individual beings. At first, the perfect enlightened Buddha itself is one of the recipients. And the second recipient is the individual Buddha, which we call Pacceka Buddha. And the third recipient is the Holy One, the disciple of the Buddha who obtained the Arhatship. Fourth one is the individual person who is striving for the realization of the holiness or arhatship. And the another person is the non-returner, which we call in Pali anagami. And another person is the person who is striving for the realization of the fruition of non-returner. Another person as the recipient is the once returner. And another one is one who is striving for the realization of that non-returning fruition. Another person is the stream winner. And again the another person is the person who is striving for the realization of that stream winning. And the another person is the person who has eradicated the obsessive defilement, abandoned the obsessive defilement through the practice of samatha meditation. When the dispensation wasn't there, that means when the dispensation of the Buddha will totally disappear, there will be some worldly people who strive to obtain the strong concentration power through which they can eradicate their defilements such as greed, hatred and delusion in obsessive way. And those people also counted as the recipient of the offering, as the individual being. And the another being is one who has moral conduct, a worldling. Another way, worldly person who has good moral conduct. And the another person is a worldly being who hasn't any moral conduct. And the last one is the animal. Animal also counted as the recipient. So animal means any kind of animal. There isn't any description what kind of animal should be the recipient of the gift of generosity. Any animal could be the recipient of the gift of generosity. These are the 14 beings which could be recipient. And the Buddha was the highest among them to bring the beneficial fruit. But the animal also there to give you beneficial good result. If you want to get the detailed information, then I will try to introduce you the sutta in Majjhima Nikaya. There is the sutta Dakkhina Vibhanga Sutta in Uparipannasa. If you want to read that sutta, then you can read it. And there are 7 community as the Sangha, Sangha Dana, to do the generous act towards the Sangha, then there are 7 types of Sanghas. The male and female Sangha group as the disciple of the Buddha. In first number, there included the Buddha himself during the time of the Buddha. Male and female Sanghas including the Buddha. That is the first number as the recipient of Sangha. In second group, there wasn't Buddha, because it is mentioned in the text when the Buddha was passed away, and the later Sangha counted as the Sangha here, both male and female Sangha as the recipient. And in another group, only the male Sanghas. And in another group, only the female Sanghas. And sometimes there might be devotees who may want to invite, describing the numbers. Please offer 10 Sanghas for the lunch in our house. So there is the number according to the request of the devotees. But Sangha means in the text it is mentioned when there will be 4 members of the Sangha getting together, 4 individual monks gathered together, then it is counted as Sangha. At least 4 members of the monks should be there to make Sangha. And there will be both groups, male Sangha as well as female Sangha, in such and such number. And again there will be the choice of the devotees. We would like to invite just only such amount of male Sangha, such amount of female Sangha. So in this way there are 7 groups of Sanghas. Do you get it? So in this way, there are various numbers given as the individual recipients and the community recipients. And Buddha described and praised one who performs the generous act. For the Sangha, the benefit is innumerable, limitless. And the value of the generous act, a significance of the generous act, depend on both sides, the giver as well as the recipient. So therefore, 4 types of generous act is mentioned. there is the generous act in which on the side of donor, they may not be pure, pious, and they may not have good moral conduct. But the recipient is pure, pious, and possessing good conduct. That is the first generous act. And there is another generous act in which the donor is pious and he possesses or they possess good conduct, full of moral behavior, and the object which is to be given is lawfully earned, but the recipient is lack of moral conduct and impure. And the third number of generous act is both donor and recipients are impure, lack of moral conduct, and the object also unlawfully earned. In fourth, both donor and recipient are pure, possessing good conduct, and the object also lawfully earned. Among these four, the fourth one is the best one. When, according to these four categories, one can perform the generous act, which mentioned in the fourth number, is the valuable one and beneficial one. And to get the proper idea, it is also good to have an example. What kind of generous act is more valuable? It is mentioned in the text, suppose Venerable Sariputta, who is the next to the Buddha in the dispensation of the Buddha, was offering something to the Buddha. And in another way, the Buddha is there to offer something to Venerable Sariputta. Between these two offerings, which one will be the valuable one? Venerable Sariputta was offering the object to the Buddha, and the Buddha himself offering the object to Venerable Sariputta. Which one would be the valuable one? Then we can understand in two persons, between two persons, donor and recipient, who is the most important one? Offering to the Buddha is important, or the offering by the Buddha is important? The quality is not the same. It is mentioned that the offering of the Buddha is the most valuable one. Why? Because the understanding of the Buddha, of the benefit of generosity, is higher on the Buddha than the Venerable Sariputta. See, who is important? The donor is important. According to this statement, the donor is important. They should have more understanding rather than the recipient. It doesn't mean that one should have more moral conduct than the recipient. It is the understanding. Understanding should be higher than the recipient. The donor should have the right understanding compared to the recipient. So therefore it is said, the offering of Venerable Sariputta is less valuable compared to the offering of the Buddha. When we perform the generous act in such a way, what to do? The time is over now. Shall I continue? Because I want to mention those remaining few aspects. Sayadaw might be coming back and I may be free from my duty. So that is why I want to mention whatever there are valuable to be mentioned. When the generous act is performed in that way, what kind of benefit people get from that generous act in this very life as well as hereafter? In connection with this fact, there was a discussion between the Buddha and a general whose name was Siha. Once General Siha, the army general Siha, went to the Buddha and asked the question, Lord, could you describe the immediate result of generous act? The Buddha said, yes. There are 5 immediate results of the generous act. And the Buddha mentioned the person who is generous is beloved by many people. Is it true? Not only people love such person, even animal love such person. When you feed your pet, the dogs and cats and other animals, so easily they get familiar with that person. So that means they show love towards that person. Even animals show their love to the donor. So therefore, the immediate result of generosity is winning others' affection. And the second benefit of the generous act is noble people approach to the donor. And then what kind of benefit you get when the noble people or wise people approach that person? When noble people approach that person, from that noble person, they can earn lot of understanding. They can get valuable advices, valuable ideas, valuable informations. So in that way, association with the noble ones produces great benefit. So therefore it is mentioned, the donor, the result of the generous act, to have association with noble people, wise people. And the third benefit of the generous act is you don't need to try to propagate that I am a donor, I have donated such and such things. When with loving feeling, compassionate feeling, feeling of oneness, you are helping others, you are doing service to others, you are seeking welfare to others, your name and fame is easily spread all over. Such and such people are so nice, so generous, so gentle, so helpful, so open-hearted, open-handed, delighted in helping others. So that fame and that reputation spreads all over. So therefore, good names, good reputation is easily gained through the generous act. But you shouldn't try to gain the name and fame when you perform the generous act. You don't need to propagate, you don't need to announce, I am a generous man, or I am a generous woman. So the act is there to propagate to your name and fame. And the fourth benefit of generous act is, whenever you go any congregation or association or in any kind of gathering, you never have to afraid of. You never have to bend your head down when you enter to those congregations and associations or the group of people, because you haven't done any unwholesome acts. All the time you are helping others, so everybody loves you, no one criticizes you. But I don't know in the Western countries. I have heard, whether it is true or not. Suppose if a person is, because of negligence, fell down on the road, and if someone tries to help him and try to lift him up and take away him or her from the road, and if they feel some kind of uneasiness. They try to blame that helping person. Because of you, I have got such kind of damage. Even they try to go to the court. So dangerous. Although you have pure mind, helping hand, but other person, if he or she may not have wise consideration, proper attention, then you might be in trouble. And it is not because of generous act. It is but because of that person's unwise consideration. You couldn't blame the generous act, but the lack of understanding. So people behave different way. And there might be some kind of instruction following from the beginning of childhood. You shouldn't do this, you shouldn't dare do that, you shouldn't believe any new strange people, strange persons. You shouldn't take anything from them. If the parents are there to advise them in that way, then they will get the habit to become suspicious to everybody. And the person who wants to help really, then they get in trouble. But generous act is generous act. It is all the time pure. You cannot blame to the generous act. And you cannot blame to the helping hand. We need to blame our own understanding. If we don't have wise consideration, every good aspect becomes bad, and bad aspect becomes good. So therefore, wise consideration, wise attention, proper consideration, proper attention is very important in our life. And the last, but not the least, benefit is, after the departure of this life, you will have happy existence, happy destination hereafter. These are the 5 benefits the Buddha described to General seer, and he was so pleased. Oh, generous act is really a good act, wholesome act, pure act. It has real power to purify one's activities, physical, verbal, as well as mental. So in this way, the generous act is the first wholesome act which the Buddha all the time taught to the people to understand themselves and to purify themselves and to eradicate unwholesome thoughts and to get good training to the mind. And depending on this generous act, our mind becomes soft, smooth, pliable, malleable. Then you can mold your mind to perform other higher wholesome acts. So you can easily preserve the precept and protect them, because you have already founded good behaviors through the generous act. You have already developed loving kindness, compassion through the generous act. And you know the helping hand is important one. So, when your mind is generous, Can you break those 5 precepts which are important in the ordinary life? You can easily feel the oneness with others. So you don't want to harm anybody. You don't want to give any trouble to anybody. So you can observe the first precept, not harming and not killing. You can observe the second precept, not taking things which hasn't given. And you are not there to break others' family happy life, being illicit yourself. And you are not using the false speeches to damage them, to destroy their lives, their property. And you are not trying to use any kind of such things which brings heedlessness, because heedlessness and the negligence is the main source to do all sorts of unwholesome acts. And when your mind is soft and smooth, you don't want to give any trouble to others, any difficulties to others, any problem. You don't want to create any problem to others, so you can easily observe the 5 precepts. And when you can observe 5 precepts, your physical and verbal behaviors are pure enough. But still the mind is strange. So therefore you have to train the mind through the mental development practice. And when your mind is full of love and compassion and free from dangerous defilements, if you do the practice, you can easily concentrate. When you reflect yourself, what I have done to others to give trouble to them. And the trouble-making thoughts are the hindrances of the practice. So if those thoughts are not arising because of the practice of generous act, so you can have easy concentration. You can fulfill the tranquility practice depending on the generous act. And again, if you want to make further progress, so you can do the Satipatthana Vipassana practice, moment after moment, looking each and every object, whatever arises at the present moment. So in this way, all those 4 ways could be easily obtained through the generous act. So that is why it is said, which I had already mentioned yesterday, Dhanam Pana Samatha Vipassana Chittassa Alankaro Hoti Parivaro. Generous act is the decoration of Samatha and Vipassana mind, and a company of that Samatha and Vipassana mind. So therefore, seeing the importance of generous act and knowing the development of various wholesome states of mind, please try to see the importance and value of generous act. And whenever there will be some problem you are facing in others, try to do the service without having any selfish motivation, through which you can get the happiness yourself, and you are there to give the happiness to others. So in this way, we can develop pure loving kindness, not just only through our mind, but through our activities. May all you be successful to understand the value of generous act and be able to serve to the many beings to give benefit and welfare to them.